The speaker is Dr. Ron Orenstein, and the topic is MY Garden Birdwatch. Allow me to introduce the speaker. Dr. Ron Orenstein holds a PhD in zoology as well as a law degree. He has written numerous books on science and nature, as well as publications on books and other related topics. And he is also a contributing author to the Handbook of the Birds of the World. Dr. Orenstein is co-author of an article on birding in Sarawak in Birding Asia, one of the foremost birding magazines in the world. My Garden Birdwatch is an annual garden bird survey which is carried out in June throughout Malaysia. Counters spend 30 minutes in their garden between 7 to 11 in the morning or 4 to 6 in the afternoon, taking note of the birds they see. Ron, is there any conservation value in a survey like this?
Oh, I think there's a very great conservation value, and there's really two kinds of conservation value. One is the conservation value of the information we're going to get about the distribution of birds. It'll add to our knowledge of birds, particularly in urban areas and places where people live. Well, there's a lot that we don't know about how many birds there are, what the common birds are, what the rarer birds are. We have ideas, but they may be wrong. But perhaps an even greater value is that by participating in the My Garden Birdwatch program, people can learn to have an appreciation for the nature around them, for an appreciation for the birds they see, and the more appreciation people have for the wildlife heritage that's right out there in front of them, the more they will care about it, the more they'll be interested in its conservation. So I see two purposes, scientific and educational, or perhaps I could even say inspirational.
It's 30 minutes and the birds are common and abundant.
So we suppose. We assume they are. I mean, the idea is to get a snapshot of just what the birds are in your local area. So you will get common birds, but the thing is, in some places in Malaysia, perhaps common birds can become rare. Bird populations in different parts of the world, we find they change. As circumstances change, as there's more development, with climate change, for example, and birds can become common in an area that weren't there before. They can disappear from an area they were normally considered to be quite common. So this sort of information, especially when you build it up over a period of years, can give you a picture of what's happening to birds in Malaysia. We can take for granted that a bird or any other animal is common. We may be right, maybe we're wrong, and we should know that if we want to do anything about it.
So are surveys like this done anywhere else in the world?
Oh yes, oh yes. The My Garden project is actually part of a worldwide attempt by BirdLife International, which is the major international conservation organization for birds, to do this sort of thing in many different countries. They do it in Great Britain. I know that it's very popular in South Africa, where thousands of people have taken part every year in doing this. So that again is one of the strengths of it. It allows us to build up a picture not just in one country, but around the world, and allows everyone to participate in a global effort to do something about the world's birds.
And have the results of those surveys been useful?
At this stage, I think it's probably too early. The My Garden project hasn't been going on long enough. You might need 10 years of data to really look in detail. But there have been similar projects in the United States, for argument's sake. There have been projects like Project Feeder Watch, which is run out of Cornell University, where people watch birds coming to their bird stations, bird feeders they set up in their yards in winter. And we've already gotten some very valuable scientific information out of that about the distribution of certain species of birds, quite a bit that we didn't know or understand fully before. And I absolutely expect that if My Garden Birdwatch is as successful as we would like it to be, that will happen here in Malaysia and in other places as the amount of data we have builds up.
So would it be fair to say that this type of survey provides more insight in temperate areas or regions rather than in a tropical region?
I've thought about that question, and I don't really think so. I mean, We tend to associate these sorts of programs, like the Feeder Watch program I just mentioned, with areas where birds are migrant, where they come in and go out again, and that's not as true in Malaysia as it is, say, in Canada, where I'm from. But the point is that we know a great deal more, I think, about birds in the temperate zones of the world, most of them, than we do about birds in the tropics, because that's where there have been traditionally more people interested, more bird watchers, more nature clubs, that sort of thing. There's so much we don't know about the basic natural history of even common birds in tropical countries like Malaysia. So, in terms of the relative importance of the information, the chance of finding out something really new, I think, is greater in the tropics than it is in the temperate zone. The chance of being a real discoverer is greater here.
That's great. The survey focuses on birds without taking into account other wildlife. So how useful are these birds as environmental indicators?
Well, of course, you'll remember that the traditional way in which you were measuring whether a coal mine, for argument's sake, was getting too dangerous to stay in was to take a bird, a canary, down with you in a cage and see how the canary did breathing the air. We have the expression the canary in the mine shaft, which is a standard expression talking about something that gives us an early warning of an environmental problem before we can sense it ourselves. Now, so birds are traditionally associated with that, and I think that they certainly can be here. And the other thing, of course, is that for people who are not dedicated researchers, who don't have the time to spend hours and hours and hours carefully searching out individuals, like people who are looking for, say, lizards or beetles or something, birds are excellent because in a very short span of time, you can go out and you can count a reasonable number of birds. That's why you have the 30-minute interval. So they're a very good group for people to contribute who otherwise are not professional scientists or don't have time to do full-time research, and they're still adding something valuable.
So birds are more useful environmental indicators than other wildlife, do you think?
They are useful, and other animals are also useful. I mean, for instance, frogs, because their skins are permeable to gases, are very sensitive, I should say, to pollutants, much more so than birds are. But it's very hard to go out for 30 minutes and count frogs. The point is that birds are accessible, birds are visible, birds are right where everyone lives. So as the kind of animal that people who are just ordinary everyday people can get useful information about, birds are probably the best, because anybody can go out, anybody can take part, anybody can have fun. I mean, as you know, birding is becoming a very popular hobby and a very enjoyable and gratifying one. And My Garden Birdwatch is just a part of it, and I hope the beginning of it for many of the participants.
So this My Garden Birdwatch survey encourages counters to carry out the survey at the same place each year.
Yes.
Why is this consistency important?
Well, consistency is important not just because if what we're trying to get is a pattern of change over time, and you're only doing a short sampling. You want to do it in roughly the same conditions and same time every time you do it, so that you don't have too many other factors complicating it. If you did one count in the middle of a forest and another count out in the middle of an open field, you're going to get totally different results. You're not going to be able to compare them. Also, one of the strengths of this is that people who are doing this from all over Malaysia, indeed from all over the world, can pool their data and compare what they found. And the ability to compare data that you might get at your spot from where I might get at my spot, if we've done them both under very similar conditions, it's much easier to compare them, to look at the differences and strengths, to see those really mean something instead of being just because we were random about when we chose to do it. So consistency, yes, is very important.
And finally, the survey seems easy enough. So let's say everyone in the same neighborhood would be doing the same survey. So is there such a thing as having too much data?
There's no such thing as too much data. That doesn't exist in science, because there's always the possibility that the next piece of information will reveal something you didn't know before. But I do think that the best way to do My Garden Birdwatch is for people to try and find their own areas. I don't think it means that every individual person has to be by themselves. There could be small groups contributing. But you don't want 50 people standing in the same spot. And again, there are all kinds of neighborhoods. Down every street is something a little bit different. One may have a grove of trees, another a little bit of wetland, a little marshy area, another a park. And they're going to see different things in different places, which will tell us things about what kind of habitats birds prefer, where they prefer to spend their time, where there are more birds as opposed to less birds. So Malaysia's a big place, and I don't think we've gotten to the point, I wish we were, where we were so saturated with contributors to My Garden Birdwatch that they literally were tripping over each other. I don't think we're at that point yet. I hope we will be one day.
Thank you very much, Ron. And that's the end of the interview.